Of course, you're using AI tools, but are you using them the right way to help your marketing? Many MSPs get this a little bit wrong and actually do damage to the marketing messages they're putting out because the AI doesn't really understand what the end goal is. My guest today is an AI marketing expert, and he's going to tell you why you must use AI like Ironman and never use it like Terminator.
Hi, I'm Mike Montague, founder of Avenue 9, an AI marketing agency.
And thanks so much for joining me on the show, Mike, because we're going to talk about how to use AI tools to tell better stories about your MSP, to boost your marketing by telling better stories. And we know that the better the stories you can tell, the better the response on the humans that you're trying to reach. And ultimately, those MSPs who are more emotional and tell great stories with their marketing, they tend to win more clients because ordinary people can connect with them better. So before we start talking about that, let's hit the lowdown on you, because you're not just your average marketing guy, are you?
No, not quite. I've had a long, interesting journey. I won't go all the way back and tell you all the details along the way, but I was on the radio in my 20s and I was the prize guy. So it was my job to go out to some random car dealership or something and figure out what their story is and then find an interesting way to tell it in a minute or less on the radio right away a couple of times. And so I practiced literally thousands of commercials that I had to write on the spot over like a 10-year period. And then I moved to be a professional sales trainer because the pay and hours are much better, by the way, if you're wondering. And it was basically my job then to write stories and help people craft their pitches and their 30-second commercials and their marketing copy in a way that connects with people in a human first way and an audience centric way, rather than just like the normal marketing slop that happens with AI now, but also the marketing slop that happens with humans when they start going into resume speak. And our company's been in business for 37 years and we have 200 blah, blah, blahs. And especially in MSPs, we can get into technical speak and acronyms real fast and make our audience tune out instead of lean in. And that's what I help people with.
That's really cool. And I also was on the radio in my 20s for 10 years, but not doing the prizes. Luckily, I was able to sit in the studio and actually just talk nonsense while other people were doing what you were doing. And of course, radio in the US is so much different to radio in the UK. So I think you got some fantastic training. In fact, I've always said that I trained as a journalist originally, and that journalism training and then 10 years on radio was the best marketing training I've ever had, because it teaches you to look at everything from someone else's point of view and to, as you say, to shape messages and learn how to communicate more effectively. It's great. Maybe every MSP should go and get trained as a journalist and go and work on radio. Maybe that wouldn't work.
I think so. I mean, every sales and marketer should, because it's about asking questions, not giving the information. And it's about listening to other people's stories and finding out what the emotional hook are and the interesting parts and the problems that you can solve or need to highlight. And so I do think it was an amazing sort of boot camp and training ground for the rest of my career.
But the money's rubbish, which is why we're both doing something else right now. So, talking about stories, I think you and I both have seen probably 3,000 examples of bad ways to use AI to generate content. You mentioned AI slop earlier. That's a common thing. You know, you can tell when content's come out of AI. And I think you could also tell when an MSP or any business has used AI to try to tell their story, because there's something just not inherently human about it. And even though AIs understand how we communicate, I think they're missing that ability to just tell a story and just be able to communicate it one human to another. What is it about storytelling that's so important in your marketing?
I'll give you the story about this one. Have you heard the Terminator versus Ironman analogy yet?
No, I haven't. Go for it.
Oh, it's a popular one. But if you remember the Terminator movies with Schwarzenegger, he is an AI agent. He's a robot that is completely AI, and you give him a mission and he's going to go out and do everything, in his capability to accomplish that mission. That's what a lot of people are trying to do with AI agents and AI bots, is have them just in one line. I'm going to give it a mission. I want you to go write my website copy, and then expect it to go and do all the website copy for you. And you never have to touch it again. You don't interact at all. You've just given the Terminator a mission. The opposite is Iron Man from Marvel, which is Tony Stark is a billionaire who's smart, funny, charismatic. He wraps himself in the Iron Man suit, surrounds himself with technology, and he has Jarvis AI in his ear that gives him information and data that he wouldn't otherwise have as a human being. And it turns Tony Stark into the superhero that can solve the problems and accomplish the missions. And I think that's a much better way to think about it, especially if you're an MSP, is how can I give myself superhuman abilities that I didn't have, rather than how can I replace myself with an AI robot? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So essentially enhancing yourself using the tools, which is all that Tony Stark does. I love that. And I've never heard that before. And that makes perfect sense when you think of the Terminator as an AI agent. That's actually kind of terrifying as we enter the agentic sort of era of AI. I think we all know it's going to go a bit Terminator anyway, but we'll just put that off for a few years.
It's going to, but I think we can still, I think Iron Man would beat Terminator. Pretty quickly, actually, if we look at it. But
yeah,
I think in marketing, it's definitely true, because what happens is every time a new channel comes out, we get telephones, we get telemarketers, we get emails, we get spammers, we get social media, we get ads and DMs and stuff coming into our feed, and people abuse the channel until it doesn't work anymore. So I think we can officially say with AI that this is going to proliferate so fast that it's going to ruin the channels. We can't possibly have thousands of people sending thousands or millions of messages to everybody on the planet. We're going to need AI to defend ourselves against AI messages, and it's going to have to sort itself out pretty fast. So that scalable model of just spam the heck out of everybody doesn't really work. And it never really has ever. It works just well enough for people to keep trying it, or this promise of this pipe dream of like, oh, if I can just cheat the system enough and find the shortcut. Well, if the shortcut works, everybody takes the shortcut, and then it's not the shortcut. That's just the regular path everybody goes. So what works in marketing and what we know about psychology is that trust is slow. AI speeds things up. It's an amplifier, and it makes things move really fast. But buyers don't move really fast. When they're thinking about changing their MSP or they're thinking about solving a problem, they have to emotionally go through some buying processes and recognizing their problem before they get to buying a solution. They're not going to see one AI automated message and be like, oh, you're right, I'm going to fire my MSP and I'm going to hire this guy. So there still has to be a relationship here. The other thing that happens is there's some problems with, I call it like the photocopy of a photocopy. Any of us that are old enough to remember copy machines know that, like with generative AI and the Terminator method, it starts to break down. You can't train AI on AI generated data, and you can't have it just take this one line prompt and keep going over and over again. I use a sales example here a lot where, did you know that in America, 53% of salespeople miss their quota for the year? And if we think about what AI does, it predicts what's most likely, the most predicted outcome. So if you ask it to write your sales script, it's going to write a script that is missing quota, that is the average, the mean of what everybody else would expect it to write. So if we want to get it to write something like the top 1% of salespeople would say, or the top 1% of marketers would do, we have to do something different. And that's what I wanted to talk about here today. Is I call it either context engineering or degenerative AI, which means we take a whole bunch of data and we whittle it down to something really powerful and pithy and concentrated that then we can send out, rather than trying to take this one thought and expand it and water it down to all this other content that we might make for our marketing.
Yeah, I understand exactly what you mean. And actually, I've been watching the rise of Grok, which of course is Twitter's AI, or XAI's AI. And, you know, Grok has been trained on Twitter. And anytime I go on Twitter, it's just full of people firing at each other with machine guns, a bit like Reddit, you know. So I don't know if we should be, I guess it's that context, as you say, and actually using what you called context engineering. Can you give us some practical examples of how an MSP would do that? So how would you use context engineering, and also with the context of stories, as we've been talking about? So give us some practical examples of how MSPs would use that.
Yeah, in short, this is what I do at Avenue 9 for my clients is I'll go and I'll interview the founder about why they started and what's important to them and what they believe their unique selling proposition is. I'll interview their top salesperson or team members or top technical person, or I'll interview their best clients or their vendor partners and stuff. And when we have these longer conversations, we can condense those down into messages. So I love what you said about Twitter and Grok. Well, if you're training on 144 characters of craziness, if you expand that out into try and write a book, you're going to get pure madness. If you take a well-written book that's educational or an encyclopedia of information, and then you say, I need you to write a blog post about this concept, AI does amazing. It's like, oh, let's bullet it down to just the main key points. And so that's really what I try and do is start with some sort of scalable story, some sort of conversation that you're already having in your business. So this might be your quarterly review meetings with your clients. You sit down and say, tell me about your problems. What's working? What's not working? All of us have these tools now. You got Copilot already turned on. Take that transcript from that meeting and upload it to AI. And now you can do some really cool stuff. Hey, what did we talk about in this quarterly review that would make a good blog post that my other clients don't know about? Or what question should I have asked in that interview that I didn't? Or what do you think is most important for this client going forward in order to make sure that they renew with me at the end of the year? And we can start asking AI interesting questions. Again, that Jarvis AI idea of like, what information did I not recognize while I was live in this conversation? But I believe the value for AI and humans going forward are conversations, because AI needs to learn how to speak like a human. So it needs examples of people talking like humans in the language they use and the stories that we use in order to replicate those. But also, humans need these analogies, these relationships, this back and forth. And it's a question and answer. So where we said Twitter is the wrong format, you're getting kind of comment versus comment in Reddit, or, hard opinion and hard versus hard opinion. You're not getting this back and forth conversation that podcasts like this are perfect, because you can ask me a question, I give an answer. And then when AI looks to give a summary answer of this, oh, here's a great example. Let me repurpose what Mike said about context engineering rather than what somebody was yelling about on a different platform. So I think if you kind of reverse engineer the structure of your conversations, you can find 3 to 5 supporting examples, stories, analogies, or even action steps or frameworks that you need to go through in order to do whatever you're trying to do, sales, marketing, or other content.
Yeah, no, I get that completely. And do you know what I am cautiously optimistic about? An always on AI that's listening to every, maybe not personal, but every work conversation you're having, every single thing. And, that's there capturing tasks for you, organizing them, prioritizing them, reminding you to follow things up. I can see nothing but benefits for that if it's private, if it's safe, and obviously if it has the context of what you're trying to achieve. And we can all see that would be a massive leap forward with an AI. Mike, you've been amazing. We are so going to get you back on the show in future years, especially when we get near the Terminator stuff, because I think you're going to have quite some insights on that. So just tell us a little bit more what you do with Avenue 9. What do you do to help MSPs, and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I talked about how we started with the interviews, but then we build this context layer for a custom GPT or AI and a marketing process and strategy around it. I've kind of find there's 3 hard parts to marketing. One is like the strategy and finding the story and an angle in your market that works. 2 is putting it together into a plan to reach the audience you're trying to reach. And then 3 is making all of those other formats and channels and messages to reach those people. So one of the cool things about AI is if we do those first 2 parts right, the third part becomes super easy, and you can get 9 times the return on your marketing than you were getting 2 years ago, because we can now instantly make those marketing messages in other languages. We can turn them into sales pitch decks, social posts, blogs, emails, whatever we need. We can now automate all of the last part of that. But if we do that before we do the context and the strategy, it doesn't work very well. So I'm happy to help anybody do that wants to try to figure it out. Luckily, I'm an internet marketer, so I'm really easy to find. If you Google Mike Montague or Avenue 9, we'll come up right away. But LinkedIn is my preferred platform. I also host a podcast, Human First AI Marketing, where I talk to different AI experts about what they're doing and cutting edge stuff and how people are using it for marketing. If those are interesting for you, go check it out. I'd love to chat.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Edge.